Hello, everybody, and welcome to Keep It Spiritually Simple. I'm your host, Sandra McGellis, and I'm so excited to welcome back Dr. Nancy to talk about sacred plant medicine and her book, Master Plant Teacher. And we're kind of going through chapter per chapter and some of the things that she feels is important. So if you've missed anything on plant medicine or sacred plant medicine or whatever it is that the video is titled, go back into the library, take a look, have a listen, and then catch up to this one because we're going to be doing some more. And we have a variety of other topics that Dr. Nancy is going to bring forth, as time moves on, because she's going to be a regular on the show because she is just a wisdom keeper, an explorer, and she has taken her life mission to learn more, to go deep, grow deeper, and then to uproot it and bring it all to you so you can see it in this bounty. So keep it spiritually simple. Also would like to ask each and every one of you to please like, subscribe, share, helps our algorithms so other people can enjoy this awesome show and its guests. So welcome, Dr. Nancy. It's December 1st. How are you?
Wonderful. And thank you again. It's always a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, it's awesome. So we're after Thanksgiving. We're going into December. We're taking a closer look at our master plant teacher book that you have written, one of many books you've written, but this is just one of them that we're going into. So we're on chapter 3, which is ancient and current cultures of social acceptance. And I know the last time we talked about all this, dark woo woo over plant medicine and what you can and can't do, what you should and shouldn't do. And it raises up a lot of resistance, fear, and instead of curiosity and expansion of the information. We're not saying it's for everybody. We're just saying, hey, let's explore this a little bit so you all, the listeners, have a better understanding. So when the topic comes up, you can reference someone like Dr. Nancy who knows her shit. So here we go. Dr. Nancy.
Yes, I put together some bullet points I wanted to go over, and then we can discuss them as things come up. So the first thing I wanted to go into was Buddhism came out of India, and Buddha was a Hindu seeking enlightenment. After achieving nirvana, he went on to teach a new way of absorption with the divine. Indian Buddhism came along before Tibetan Buddhism. Amrita is the entheogenic potion used by Tibetan Buddhism. Soma, Soma, is the entheogenic elixir used by Indian Buddhism, as recorded in the Rig Veda. Amrita, I'll spell that for you, Amrita, is an entheogenic liquid, is seen in artwork being held in cups by the 16-arm Indian god Hejra. And Soma is recorded in the Rig Veda as a plant god and is very sacred to the Hindus. Soma is an entheogenic mushroom with the power to give wisdom and strength. The Rig Veda is a Sanskrit text over 35,000 years old and is extremely devotional to the Hindus. In the ancient Hindu scripture passages, Amrita is the psychotropic plant ground into a powder, and then water or milk was added to it to create an entheogenic liquid. Amrita, also known as Soma, which is referred to in the Rig Veda as a drink that will show one that they are eternal and live beyond this physical life. Soma was used in Hindu ceremonies, and the Brahmin priest class drank the entheogenic liquid during the religious fire ceremonies. Soma and Amrita are different names, yet both are plant-based entheogens used in spiritual ceremonies. The ancient Hindus called it Soma, and in Buddhism it is referred to as Amrita, as a Sanskrit word with the meaning of immortality. The entheogenic potion called Amrita, just like Soma, would show the initiate in sacred ceremony of one's divinity. Now, what I thought was very interesting was when I was doing my research on this book, I just thought that was very interesting because we only hear about how the Hindu monks and the Buddhist monks just meditate and they're able to get into these higher states. And for many of them, they could, but for many of them, they just couldn't seem to get beyond the physical realm. And therefore, it was very interesting to find out that the Hindu monks and the Buddhist monks were actually using plant-based psychotropic plants to help them in their spiritual journeys as well, to be able to cross the veil and be able to get into these upper dimensions. Soma, also known as Amanta muscaria, is the entheogenic mushroom which is the red with white spots on the top of its head. There are scriptures in the Rig Veda discussing the characteristics of the hallucinogenic mushroom. A mushroom called Psilocybe cubanus is locally grown in India, and there are several varieties of psilocybin psychoactive mushrooms that grow in India. A modern tribe called Sandal, Santal, in the Bihar state region states that they know that the psilocybin mushroom has psychedelic properties. Soma is a sacred religious plant with psychedelic powers that was used in ceremonies in India. Soma originated from Siberian shamans who traveled to India, most likely on a spice route, and brought Soma with them for their religious ceremonies. The Siberian shamans introduced Soma to the local culture in India, where they settled and mingled amongst the people. The Siberian shamans living among the people in India would perform their religious ceremonies, and Soma was introduced and accepted into the culture in ancient India. The Rig Veda mentions Soma 120 times in gratitude for this blessed mushroom of godly qualities. Siberian shamans were known for the usage of Siberian mushrooms in their religious ceremonies. Soma power expression was used to imply that the psychedelic substance was in the drink and was a powerful ambrosia. The elixir denoting soma was an entheogenic plant-based drink used for the ancient Hindu and ancient Buddhism ceremonies. Only in the Buddhist tradition it was called amrita, yet in both religious ceremonies it was a psychedelic mushroom potion. And this first confirmation of shamans using magic mushrooms dates back to 8,000 to 6,000 BCE from carved artistry on the wall of the Tassali Tassili cave in eastern Algeria. The cave carving etched into the rock has the shaman holding a bundle of magic mushrooms in each hand. This verified that psychotropic plants were used in ancient cultures. Many Indian demigods were entheogenic plants and were so sacred that the Indian priests placed them at the level of deity. In ancient India, the god Rudra, Rudra, is associated with the mushroom muscaria, and then later the god Siva, Siva, became popular and is connected with the mushroom psilocybin. In Vajrayana, I'll spell that for you, Vajrayana, Buddhism, mushrooms were used in religious ceremonies. Also in Mexico tribes, the psilocybin mushroom was divinity and therefore was a supreme being. To ingest the psilocybin mushroom was to take communion with God's flesh, allowing the participant to receive this unity. And, it's something just hit me. In the Catholic tradition, when you take communion, it's Jesus's flesh and his blood. And here they just mentioned how maybe there was something that was carried over, because it was saying here that to ingest psilocybin mushroom was to take communion with God's flesh, allowing the participant to receive this unity. So I thought that was just interesting. There's a little bit of a connection there.
Well, wouldn't we say that all things on earth are God's flesh? You really? I mean, that's how I would look at it.
Yeah.
And then I would also have a question of, like, you would call him Jesus, Yeshua, Yeshua. Um, wouldn't it be likely to say that he or anyone in his realm was also doing that to get closer to God themselves? Is there any, I don't think there's anything we've ever heard about it, but I mean, I know you've done a lot of
Oh, yeah.
religious studies and things like that, but when someone's going into deep meditation and so on, they're often using some
Mhm.
sort of plant medicine. Um, may not go by the same names as we have it now, but would it be fair to say that he and his
Yes.
disciples or anyone else also,
Well,
you know,
Jesus' parents were Essenes, Essene. The
yes.
Essenes came out of, they were the Jewish sect that came out of Egypt. And so they mingled amongst the Egyptians and they would have exposure to the Egyptian culture and their religious ceremonies and rites. Well, we know in the Egyptian mystery schools that the initiates did take psychotropic plants as part of their initiation rites and ceremonies. So when you're living amongst in, I mean, they were living in Egypt. It was they were exiled there. Well, actually kept in captivity until they were released when Moses came to, free them out, bring them out of into Palestine, well, not Palestine, but actually over into what we call Jerusalem now. But it was in that time frame, the Essenes came in from Egypt, and then they were always known as pretty much the spiritual sect amongst the Jews. And they were different because they did come out of Egypt, and his parents, being Essenes, would have this information. In fact, even the Essenes would have their own schools where they learned a lot more than just the traditional Jewish religion. And so, yes, he would have been exposed to this information. It's possible it could have been that that was still carried over was in their tradition as part of their ceremonies that they would have. And the Essenes lived separate from the regular Jewish community. So, yeah, it's very, very possible. More like probable, actually.
I kind of thought so, but I thought I would ask because you just happen to mention Jesus flesh, and I'm thinking, well, when I eat plants and anything, I think of it as the flesh of the divine creator.
Well, as we
So
get, I'm sorry, yeah,
no, it's just a figure of speech, so to speak.
yeah.
When you're taking communion, you're eating the body of Christ, you're drinking the blood of Christ. Well, that could have a lot of connotations to it because of demonic and satanic rituals that go on, and those being interwoven into some of the religious belief systems. So I was just curious. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll get into more and deeper when we get deeper into this book, how the early Christians, the first 4 centuries, they actually used psilocybin on a regular basis. They would grind it up into a powder and they would put it into the wine, and then they would put it into the bread, and they would have that as their communion. And so and it's been proven because we have all these frescoes all over France in these churches in Germany, and I go deeper into that into all these frescoes. It has Jesus holding mushrooms. He's standing under a mushroom tree. There's all these mushroom trees. There's the Adam and Eve under mushroom trees. It's just so much that people from around the world go into these different places to actually see them for themselves. And so they know the first 4 centuries, this was part of the religious ceremonies, because you have to remember in the early times back then, when Paul went over to Greece, he was, well, the Eleusis mysteries were very well known and had just stopped after 2,000 years over in Greece. And so when Paul went to Ephesus, which was in Greece, and he is having these religious ceremonies and talking about the way, and it was interesting because for them it was like, oh my gosh, the Eleusis Mysteries was reborn. It was rebranded under, Christianity, because they were using these sacred plants that could show you your divinity was within, and your union with the divine essence was within. And even Jesus was saying the kingdom of heaven's within. You need to go within. And so it really helped people with their connection with the divine. And one of the nice things about Christianity was women, during a time of a culture where women really were almost, I think, almost property. Women were considered equals in Christianity, where they could actually serve and participate in the ceremonies, serve it, cook it, be a part, they were classified as equals. And I think that was one of the nice things that Jesus was able to do, is elevate women's status and position within Christianity at that time. And so it was very attractive for women to be a part of the Christian belief system that was newly offered in Greece. So we'll go deeper into that when we get into that chapter, but it really is really surprising, the research that I came out with this when I was going through this. I had a lot of aha moments, and I was like, oh wow, so what better way to spread the good news is to, and you have to understand, I mean, these substances were widely accepted and widely used. It was part of the culture to use these plant essences that had, a lot of them had psychotropic and hallucinogenic effects. So they were not outlawed, they were just actually widely used and accepted, and it was part of the culture. So people a lot of times would have these parties, and there was all kinds of hallucinogenic plant-based plants, ground up and was in the bread or the food and the wine and stuff like that. So why not have it as part of your religious ceremonies? And because it did show people how our divinity, and by being able to go into these other dimensions and actually see ourselves as who we truly are, with everything stripped off. I mean, it's the flesh, the mind, the ego, the personality, all these different things that we carry that kind of cover the soul. And so, yeah, it was really an eye opener to see how it really didn't have the taboo that we think it would have today.
And that it does have today, which is what we're trying to
Yeah.
unfold here and uncover, and to take away, where that cloud came in and separated the sacred to the taboo,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you
Yeah.
just can't have this general conversation with just anybody there, because they don't know about it. They immediately go to fear, resistance. That's wrong. What are you doing? And so that's why you and I are here right now, is to bring this information to the viewers and hopefully spread the word about more information on sacred plant medicine. So keep it rolling, sister.
Yeah, I think they knew a lot about botanical things back then. And I think, like we had mentioned on another show, I just want to make sure for people just popping in for the first time, that these psychotropic plants have DMT in them. And DMT is not foreign to the body. Actually, our brain produces it. It needs it to live. The brain does, the body does. And so we have this thinking that these psychotropic plants, are addictive or, toxic. They're not a toxic, they're not dangerous, and they're actually anti-addictive, because they take people off heroin and LSD and hard drugs that people are trying to have for years, maybe getting off. They go into a sacred ceremony with one of these plant essences, and these master plant teachers, and it actually will they don't have the addiction anymore afterward, and no withdrawal symptoms whatsoever. So yeah, I think that we've kind of lost our roots with botanicals. I think we're having what they call a psychedelic renaissance, because now we're realizing these plants are very, very sacred, and what they can do, the healing properties, the expansion of consciousness properties. There's so much to these, and I think we're going to be learning about these for many years to come, the benefits of that they
Mm.
have to offer.
Yes, because we already dive into herbs and botanicals for physical ailments constantly. That's okay. That's always free use. Everyone's interested in that, right? Something
Yeah.
natural versus pharmaceutical. Now we're talking into the spiritual realms. So it would just make perfect sense to understand both. So I greatly appreciate you sharing your viewpoints and your years and years of dedication and study. So thank you for this.
Oh, thank you for your acknowledgement.
Course, of course.
Um, well, so we have a variety of entheogens were used in Tibetan Buddhism, such as flowering plants, mushrooms, psychoactive grasses, and possibly ayahuasca, due to the ability of trading between countries using spice routes. Entheogens were used in initiation ceremonies to grant Buddhahood without the use of other routine spiritual practices to the initiate. The entheogenic plant called soma also went by another name, such as haoma, Haoma, to mean the watery liquid was removed and therefore was drank as a strong brew in the sacred plant ceremony with reverence. Soma predates the origins of the Zoroastrian religion in Iran. Soma was so beloved that it was officially recognized as a god that came to earth and was venerated by Varuna, Varuna, who was a Hindu god according to the Rig Veda texts. In Buddhism, the goddess Marici, Marici, is holding Asoka, Asoka sprig, which is an entheogenic plant known to provide psychedelic experiences. The Asoka tree in Buddhism is the holy tree due to its known spiritual powers. These entheogenic plants communicated with the participants and transferred their power to them. The Asoka tree is also called Kamdamba, and that's Kadamba tree, which has been found in a laboratory to have psychoactive properties similar to psilocybin and DMT, which is this one I always have a hard time with, dimethyltryptamine, and therefore produces visions and mystical experiences. And that's why a lot of people just say DMT for short. Modern day initiations in this particular Buddhism is Vajrayana, Vajrayana Buddhism, is still called the sacramental drink Amrita to provide an ego death to the initiate. In the past, Amrita was the entheogenic mushroom liquid, and now for several reasons is purely symbolic and is an herbal drink. But I think they say that for the camera, but I do believe they are still using these plant botanicals, because the Buddhists have this for centuries and centuries. They have this book of herbs that they use, Chinese medicine, which is all plant-based, to heal, cancers and things like that. For those that are in Buddhism, ethnobotanists and pharmacologists that are over 400 religious cultures around the world that have used entheogens and to expand consciousness in their sacred ceremonies. Some of them include soma, amrita, muscaria, hallucinogenic mushroom documented in the ancient Rig Veda text used by the Hindu religion. Other entheogenic sacred plants include peyote from the North American Indians and psilocybin by the tribes in Mexico. The morning glory flower is an entheogen that was used in ancient Mexican Aztecs in religious ceremonies. Now, this is very interesting. It brings up here on the morning glory flower. When I was taking a tour of the Grand Canyon and I was driving out, they're everywhere on the side of the road. And the local guide on the tour bus was saying, "Oh, you don't even want to touch those things. They are so strong, and there are psychedelic effects that you could actually, be affected by them." And so that was very interesting that they just grow even, out in the Southwest here in the United States. They're just all along the side of the roads. They're really pretty, these beautiful white flowers. And I recognized them right away, but it was interesting that I didn't know if the tour guide was going to mention about them, but he actually did. And ayahuasca has been used in sacred religious ceremonies and is still today in South America. Ergot, Ergot, was the sacred and visionary plant utilized annually in the religious ceremonies in ancient Greece at the Eleusinian Mysteries temple complex. Iboga is the entheogenic holy plant, is still used in African religious ceremonies. And ibogaine, the pharmaceutical grade version, is used in modern cultures today. Soma is an ancient and entheogenic mushroom that was used in the Hindu religious ceremonies and originated from Siberia, with the ancient trade routes that came to India. So there was a couple, they were called the Wassons, Wassons, who discovered these special mushrooms and submitted them for laboratory analysis to a French biologist, Roger Heim. Gordon Wasson later sent the mushrooms to the laboratory, Sandoz, Sandoz, to conduct a further study. Albert Hoffman also looked at these unusual mushrooms, and he discovered that the psychoactive substances in these psilocybin mushrooms and called them, oh, they were called psilocybe, Psilocybe, and then he called them psilocybin. And then he also mentioned them as psilocin, Psilocin. I spill these for if people want to do further research and look them up. He also performed research and found that the seeds of the flower morning glory also had psychoactive properties and ties that were to be ingested by indigenous people. Now, Albert Hoffman is the one who discovered the LSD-25 molecule, and he was saying that LSD should be included with the other psychoactive substances in the plant medicine group. He wanted LSD included. It's not. We do not right now include LSD. We think that it's created in a lab, so therefore they've kind of still classify LSD as not in the plant medicine group. But DMT, dimethyltryptamine, was made into synthetic versions called mescaline, mescaline. So we have mescaline, we have ibogaine, and we have haramine, Harmine. Those are the synthetic pharmaceutical versions from these some of these botanical psychotropic plants. DMT was also found in the liquid that comes out of the glands and skin of the Bufo alvarius toad and carries psychedelic substances identified as DMT-5. And that 5 is, if you wanted to, anybody wants to look this up, it's 5-methoxy, methoxy-DMT. Ayahuasca also carries, excuse me, DMT in the vine and leaves, which when brewed together provide a natural medicine used by indigenous people for unknown number of centuries. Another plant called marijuana was also found in the mid-1960s. One is called tetrahydrocannabinol, which is the THC version, and the other is the cannabinoid CBD version, which is more properties for healing pain. So you have the THC is the one that has the psychedelic properties, and whereas the CBD marijuana doesn't have any psychotropic effects. So that way people can know the difference between those two. Has anything came up for you wanted to talk about or bring up?
The only thing that was coming up for me was like the Salem witch hanging and burning. And I was thinking about like in the late 1600s, wherever that was going on here, Europe, there's all kinds of different stories, and who can believe Google. But I was thinking of like that was like their scare for anyone to be touching herbs or plants, or we want to just put a whole fear based in across the world. Don't you dare touch anything and get anybody healed or healthy, and or take a spiritual trip to release trauma or anything. It just, I don't know, that was just popping up for me.
It's funny you bring that up because, and that's actually a really good point, because a lot of these people who were declared witches and warlocks were basically herbologists. They were working with the botanical plants out in the forest. So they would have been exposed to a lot of these psychoactive plants, such as mushrooms and different types of psychedelic grasses and all this stuff that actually just grows naturally. And then they would have known the combinations of how to mix them together for healing. And back then, I think that they put this scare that, maybe there was spells that was in these brews. And also it was a way that maybe people were leaving the current spiritual belief system at the time. I would say for in this country would have been Christianity mostly, and so therefore they would feel threatened, so they would clamp down on that, and would have them not just excommunicated, but also they would probably want to eliminate them. And so that's where we got a lot of these people, unfortunately, were accused of being witches, which had nothing to do with casting spells on people, but they recognized that when people were under these substances, they were different. They were completely different because they were probably having these mystical experiences and were changing their life as a result of it. So they felt
Sure.
like they were under a spell.
Yeah, and they were no longer under the control of the church
Hmm.
or
Yes.
churches or whatever, you know.
So they could have been creating mystics,
Yes,
having all these
exactly.
inner mystical experiences and never the same afterward when you cross over the veil and go into these other dimensions, and then you come back and it's almost, well, it's similar to a near-death experience. It's very,
Hmm.
very similar. But yeah, so
Yes,
that's,
thank
thank you
you.
for bringing that up. That is a very good point. Um, Psychedelic plants bring about states of consciousness that transcend the conscious mind. The Rig Veda is one of the oldest texts on this planet, and there are many verses and information that mention a holy brew called Soma. Again, it's spelled Soma. Soma has the ability to provide expanded states of consciousness and allowed people to transcend the third dimensional reality. In the Rig Veda, it was mentioned that the initiates would experience a great light or enlightenment and the discovery of God or God realization. The Persia Zoroastrian Zen Avesta texts are one of the oldest in the world and describe a holy tea called Haoma, Haoma. In ancient China, the usage of cannabis, also known as marijuana, was documented by the Chinese Emperor Shen Nag. That's spelled Shen space NENG from as far back as 2737 BC. It was used for healing, relaxation, and during spiritual ceremonies. It is theorized that entheogens were used in early Jewish times. Here we go. So, in the Bible and in the Old Testament, a white substance called manna, MANNA, is mentioned, and many feel it was psychedelic in nature. The Aztecs, the Mayans, Toltecs used peyote. There's also seeds from flowers such as morning glory, angel trumpets that have angel trumpets are two different flowers that have psychedelic effects and are currently used in addition to peyote for sacred ceremonies by indigenous natives in Mexico and North American tribes. The Amazonian sacred brew was called ayahuasca, goes back as far as history that no one ever really knows. And it and when it was used began in South American tribes. Ayahuasca is known for its healing properties and for spiritual ceremonies. Ayahuasca is known as the plant that will cause an awakening and initiate one to a greater awareness. It has been said by many indigenous people that the plants told them of the botanical psychedelic properties that would allow the ancient Greeks the ability to cultivate these substances. The plant teachers would have instructed the herbalists in Greece the same way they would have taught the Mexican herbalists. Hence, the same psychedelic fungus was seen and experienced in both ancient cultures. It is believed by William Eboden, Embodem, he was an ethnobotanist, that datura, Datura, were plant-based, also known as blue lotus. Well, there's also this Nymphaea caerulea, Nymphaea space Caerulea, with that's one that's also known as a blue lotus. Um, Entheogens used in Egyptian religious ceremonies. They would have come from the Mediterranean area, dried, and through the ancient spice route, be transported to Egypt. Other known entheogens that were used in Egypt for medicine and sacred religious ceremonies would include ergot, E-R-G-O-T, mandrake, M-A-N-D-R-A-K-E, blue lotus, and flowering plant, datura, and opium poppy flower, plus possible others that are currently unknown. The Acacia Acacia tree grew in ancient Egypt and had psychoactive DMT fungus that grew on it. All these entheogenic plants would cause an ego death and rebirth of mystical experience that Egyptian initiates would have during the religious ceremonies. There's an ongoing list of entheogenic plants being researched and documented that were used in ancient Egypt. It is accepted that entheogens were a prominent part of Egyptian ancient life. So here we go. We were talking about how the Essenes, which were the Jewish community living in Egypt, they would have exposure to this. And if it's part of the culture, it would not have been uncommon for people to not only know about these, but participate. They're just plants, just growing everywhere, in the Middle East. And then through spice trade routes, you would have access to all these kind of herbs and spices and botanical plants of different natures. So yes, the Amantia muscaria was an entheogenic mushroom that was ground up, placed in wine for the initiates to drink, and they also ate the tops of the mushrooms. These practices go back to the Greek religious ecstasy festivals and sacred entheogenic ceremonies of the Dionysus. And the mysteries of Eleusis took place annually for the initiates for 2 millennia in ancient Greece. Then the rise in power of the early Christian Vatican Church in the 4th century, they deemed it pagan, heretical, and too wicked to continue, and therefore shortly after the Council of Nicaea decreed the Eleusinian mysteries ceremonies closed permanently. The secrecy only added to the mystery of the ceremonies, for all initiates were bound to keep what took place secret and never to reveal the details of their mystical experiences. People came from all over the world to participate in this once-in-a-lifetime experience, for the experiencer could participate in only one sacred ceremony. Each participant would go through only one initiation and therefore only one religious mysteries of Eleusis ceremony in their entire life. This mystical experience was highly prized, and the only thing that was shared was that it was a personally deep, meaningful spiritual experience. Kykeon, that's spelled Kykeon, is the mystic elixir that was served to the Eleusis Mysteries participants, which included the ergot, K.I.S.S, Claviccepes, and I'll spell the second one, Purpurea, which has the psychotropic properties. And this is a fungus mushroom species that grew on the local grains and wild grasses in the area near the Eleusis Temple complex. You can actually still go there today. It's just outside Athens, and many people from all over the world go to the Eleusis Temple complex that's there. A mythical story about the Greek goddess Persephone is that while she was picking flowers, she was abducted by Hades, and he took her to a lower spiritual realm where the dead reside. The type of flower, narcosis, Narkissos, would have hallucinogenic alkaloids, and it stories of a maiden called Pharmacia. You'll find this interesting. Also known, now the definition of pharmacia is use of drugs, in which he alluded to the priest class's usage of the psychedelics in the Eleusis mysteries in Greece. Plato was basically saying in the allegory that Persephone was taken over by ingesting a flower with psychotropic properties and then having mystical experiences. In the Greek culture and in many cultures, the sacred marriage is the union between the spiritual realms and all the vegetation, sentient beings on earth. The spiritual beings dance with the vegetation beings and bring light, which provides nourishment to plants, which then feed all of life. It is known in the Eleusis mysteries that a holy brew was served to the initiates and forever changed how they saw themselves and the external world of appearances. They experienced the ego death and saw that there was no reason to fear a death of their mortal body. This was such a sacred experience. These sacred entheogenic ceremonies stayed in existence for almost 2,000 years. The end of these Eleusis mysteries came because of the Christian emperor Theodosius, who decreed that they must stop and considered them pagan. There was a gigantic hall in Eleusis where over 3,000 initiates would partake in the highly spiritual entheogenic ceremonies at that time. And there were famous initiates that participated in the Eleusis mysteries over the 2,000-year time frame, which would include Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, the Emperor Marcus Aurelius, and the Roman lawyer and consul Marcus Cicero, who later became a philosopher and reported about how these mysteries were the cause that shaped civilizations. And the Eleusinian mythical traditions, death and rebirth, were the cycle of life. And we'll find these in many of the agricultural societies. And the Greek god called Dionysus provided the cultivation of barley, and once fermented with a fungus, would provide a drink containing hallucinogenic substances. Clearly, arrowroot of barley is the likely psychotropic ingredient in the Eleusinian potion. In the Greek culture, fermented drinks of all kinds were created, made from different plants, fruits, grains, and herbs. So we can thank the Greeks for all these alcoholic drinks we have today, right? I think they were the ones that created all this. The Eleusis Mysteries was an annual event who were initiated in order to have the actual mystical experience. Eleusis was not a spiritual school. It was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, and others would not break their initiatory vows of silence, for death was the penalty. Yet they hinted at how glorious it was to have the Eleusis Mysteries experience. Religions today talk about these mystical states of being, yet they don't offer any direct first-hand mystical experience of connection with the divine essence. Anyone who is interested in spirituality and the mystery of life and who wanted to experience the arcane truths directly for themselves came to Eleusis to be initiated into the mysteries. The Eleusis mysteries, again, they lasted for 2,000 years. And what was promised to the participants, I think because it lasted so long, is because it was you could guarantee that if you came into this, everybody was coming out with these mystical experiences. So each Eleusis initiate would have visions and removal of their outside body to experience the divine self and thus their immortality, seeing that there is life beyond this physical plane of existence. The Eleusis mystery entheogenic potion that was served to all the initiates was called Kukeon, Kukeon. And it's so interesting because wouldn't it be amazing? We're told, okay, you're this divine being, you're immortal, you're eternal, you live forever, but you're having to take somebody else's word for this. You're reading scriptures, but having your own mystical experience where you actually see this for yourself, you're thinking, holy smokes, this is for real. What they're telling you is for real, because up to that point, you're just believing them based on their word. But this was amazing because now people were walking away with their own actual direct firsthand experience that what the scriptures were talking about was indeed true. And this is like whether it came from Egypt or Asia or South America. This was just amazing that these plants have this ability to basically, the plants are saying, you are such a divine being that we want to show you your divinity, how precious you really are, how loved you really are, and your divine nature. So I think that's just such a beautiful gift that these plants give us. Did you want me to continue some more here on this? Anything you wanted to add?
No, I'm just following along and
Okay,
enjoying.
soaking it up. Okay, so they had this term for these initiates when they came in, and once they achieved the ability to have these mystical experiences, they actually call them epotites, Epoptes, which denotes the one who has seen it all. The mystical experience forever changed these epotites, which continued on with their lives, became awakened, cracked the riddle of life, and saw their true divine identity. When the time came for the passing from this physical life, the epotites were no longer afraid of death, for they had already known what lies on the other side, remembering their true self identity, which is eternal. It was the entheogen that facilitated this mystical experience for each participant. Before all the major religions of the world, there was Eleusis. The spiritual center for the world was Eleusis, and people came from all over to have the mystical experience that was promised would change their life forever. Now, this is a very interesting point this brings up because we grow up in an era where for centuries we've had all these belief systems. So can you imagine living in a world where there was no belief systems? That there was just the Eleusis mysteries? That was there was no, dogma and rites and rituals and all that hadn't been created yet by humanity. There was just pure spirituality, just pure spirituality in the sense that it just wanted to show your divine nature, that you truly are a divine being, and you don't have to guess that you are this divinity, this divine being, this soul. Um, because, when you're covered over in flesh, you kind of, and you're covered over with the ego and personality and all this stuff that you're not quite sure. And so this really proves that you are a divine spiritual being, and you have this gift of immortality and living through eternity. And so I just thought that was interesting because we kind of, what would that be like to be in an era where we're just totally free? It's just pure spiritual truth of just knowing your own divine nature. Just that's it. You don't need anything more. All the other stuff is just kind of added on to, it gets confusing. And I would say that would be pure spirituality. I mean, that just kind of jumped out at me.
Totally. I'm right there with you. I'm aiming for that myself.
Sometimes we spend a lifetime deprogramming, a lot of
Exactly. That's
times.
exactly what I've been doing, and many of our listeners are doing. So that's why this is important information.
Basically, this brew from the Eleusis Mysteries was redeemed them from the dream state and awakened them to their divine nature of immortality. It was an honor and a once in a lifetime event to be able to be initiated in the Eleusis Mysteries and therefore be included in this religious community, or I would say more spiritual community, really, because it wasn't a religion at the, yeah. A participant would be initiated only once in their lifetime. The Eleusis initiation was a major part of Greek culture, and people came from far and wide to be among the participants who encountered these sacred ceremonies. All walks of life came to be initiated into the Eleusis mysteries, from the top dignitaries, royal families, political leaders, to poets, authors, teachers of all levels and subjects, as well as slaves and free people. No one was turned down based on economic, civil, or vocational status. The tide turned against these spectacular opportunities that the Eleusis Temple offered the population, which was allowed for everyone to experience for almost 2 millennia. And the Christian Vatican Church of the 4th century had become the new excuse me, official religion in Greece, and thus ended the Eleusis ceremonies permanently. And the ergot used in the Eleusis mysteries came from barley and local grasses, not from rye. It is undisputed that the Eleusis potion had the ergot, again it's spelled E-R-G-O-T, substance in it and was ingested during the ceremony that created the sovereign and highest point of the spiritual experience. Evidence shows that ergot grew on local grasses in Greece and also on barley grain. Greeks had learned that ergot is a fungus that has psychedelic properties. Rye did not become part of any diet until after the start of the Christian era in 313 AD. The Greek Eleusis mysteries ended by the Christian church decree from Rome shortly after 313 AD. And once someone has a sacred mystical experience, it's hard to put it into words, and the initiates of the Eleusinian mysteries were bound to secrecy. All the information found on what happened in the Eleusis annual religious ceremonies verifies that psychedelic substances were used to facilitate the mystical experience for the participants. The Eleusis mysteries were celebrated by thousands of people each year. The Eleusis temple complex was just outside Athens. The two Eleusis mystery ceremonies were held twice a year, one ceremony in the spring and the other in the autumn. During the years that the Eleusis mystery ceremonies took place, secrecy was kept so prominently that even to this day, no one really knows all the complete details of what took place during these sacred plant ceremonies. The Roman statesman Cicero, who was a documented participant of the Eleusis mystery ceremony, wrote that individuals from all over the world made a pilgrimage to the Eleusis mysteries temple for initiation. The entheogenic mystical experiencer was unable to put into words their Eleusinian ceremony, and therefore this once in a lifetime precious memory was ineffable. These are the symptomatic reactions not to a drama or a ceremony, but to a mystical vision. And since the site could be offered to thousands of initiates every year, dependability upon schedule, it seems obvious that a hallucinogen must have induced it. Based upon what little the Eleusinian initiates did share, it was a transformational experience. The Kykeon, Kykeon, was a botanical elixir that was served to the Eleusinian initiate. Soma is a psychedelic served in Indian and Persian religious ceremonies to their participants in order for them to have their sacred mystical experiences. And we also have Mexican mushrooms. There's a connection between the Mexican mushroom and the Eleusis mysteries also, because in the Mexican cultures, they have ineffable visions are described by their experiencers as well. So we've got the Greeks, they have their expression that they said that the mushrooms were the food of the gods and considered holy plants. Mystical experience were much sought after and experienced by many in the Greek antiquity culture. And they were discussed in the writings from many authors at that time. This one, I go even deeper into my book, this one where Plato discussed on his magical mushroom was capable of providing mystical visions and was able to take one to realms beyond the physical world. Plato's teachings reveal in an allegory form the sacred geometric patterns that are part of the mystical experiences and many other deep esoteric meanings that only a participant would have learned in the Eleusis mysteries. Here's one, this brings up a point. When we're talking about these sacred geometric patterns, the shamans in South America, with regards to ayahuasca, when they sing their acaros, they can see the geometric patterns that comes out of these prayers that's actually going into the brew. And so you've got this, what they call science. There's actually spiritual science to a lot of this as well. So I think this definitely shows that these plants grew around the world. the psychotropic plants. They were used in ceremonies around the world by cultures all over. And here's another one here that was brought up um, in regards to Egypt. Entheogens are recorded in ancient Greece in Eleusis and in the Temple of Hathor in Egypt. Hathor, she's the goddess of sound, Hathor. So when you're talking about the goddess of sound, you're talking about the sound current, the audible life stream. In the Christians, they would call it the word. In the East, they call it NAM, N-A-M. I go into a lot about the sound and it's the light and sound aspects in Our Divinity Revealed, which we'll get into when we get into that book. But the Egyptians knew quite a bit about the light and sound technology, spirituality. Our modern culture thinking causes us to believe that ancient cultures did not use psychotropic plants for healing, visions, and religious ceremonies because of the fact that they are not legal and are freely available to the public today. Entheogens they were definitely a part of the ancient cultures. And psychedelic was in many ways legal in the ancient world. It is simply historically inaccurate to imagine otherwise. Even the early Christians, who were known as the Nazarenes and later called the Gnostic Christians, utilized the sacred entheogens for their spiritual initiations and ceremonies. The merging of the Neoplatonists with the Nazarenes created the sect known as the Gnostics. Neoplatonic followers had a wide array of entheogens used in their religious ceremonies because remember, Plato was in the Eleusis Mysteries, so it would have been a part of his teachings that he would have, passed down to Aristotle and then to Socrates. So because you have this Greek influence in with the Nazarenes, the Christians, and who together combined they became the Gnostics. And so just to kind of wrap this up, Plato was an Eleusis Mysteries initiate and would have passed on to his students the blessings of information regarding the use of entheogens in religious ceremonies for further expansion and firsthand mystical experiences. So that is my notes on chapter 3. But just to wrap it up, I just kind of want to throw this out here to you that can you imagine having, Plato being your spiritual teacher, and he's introducing these mystical experiences. Would you like to have some mystical experiences? Like, who would want to turn that down? Who would want to know firsthand uh, to see your own divinity and where you came from on the other side? And probably a lot of other things are revealed to these initiates as to maybe why they came here and what was their purpose work and what were some of their goals for coming into the earth plane and the earth school. So yeah, that would be very interesting. I would think, to have that kind of a teacher be able to offer that to you as part of your spiritual curriculum.
I love it, and we need more of it. That's why, you're here to explain all of this research that you have done for a long period of time. I like to go back to what we were talking about with when I was thinking about, the Salem witches, and maybe that was like, hey, no one's allowed to do herbs and botanicals and find spiritual, heightened relationship with God. We need you down here in control by us. And so we're going to make an example of all that. And for some
Mhm.
reason, my head then bounced to King James.
Mm.
And when it bounced to King James, I was like, well, he was here, 1500s, 1600s, and he is responsible for sort of having the Bible rewritten so that it could, under what I want to call the pretense of uniting Scotland and England. And so trying to make some of the verbiage and the wording familiar to both so they could be in union with each other. But then I pulled it up on my Google, and there was a lot about him talking about, you know, witches and conjuring spells to kill him, etc., and so on and so forth. So I don't know where the connection is on all that. I don't have any experience, but I never doubt my guide team when my head starts going dot to dot to dot,
Hmm.
because then I can look into it and intuitively, if I didn't, I wouldn't be able to expand. But if I just follow that intuitive part, it sort of has a connection of some sort. Do you have any comment on that?
Well, it's interesting you bringing that up because as you're talking about that, I'm thinking of other history of how the Gnostics and the Knights Templar, and there was a group Mary Magdalene created that was in southern France.
Yes. I
Oh,
cannot think of the name, but they
Cathars.
were all, yes, the Hathors, and they were all
Cathars.
wiped out.
They were all wiped out, and
Because of their
the
mystical,
Vatican. Well, they had the ancient secrets. They had the wisdoms. They were the wisdom keepers at that time.
yes.
And so if you want to clamp down on those wisdoms and those not coming out, and you could further basically have your agenda, it's you're gonna kind of want to eliminate those that have these secrets. And so we don't have any Gnostics anymore. We don't have any Cathars anymore. We don't have any Knights Templar. And it was very interesting because a little side note, when I was living in Portugal, and one of the things, my trips back and forth, there's a palace and monastery of the Knights Templar. And they actually have two of those, and I was able to go and see them. It's about a half an hour outside of Lisbon. And it's just amazing. It's actually in the town of Tomar, Tomar. So anybody wants to look this up, Tomar, Portugal, Tomar, Tomar, Portugal. It is a town, it's completely all about Knights Templar. So those that are all into the Knights Templars should really go see this palace. You get to go into the palace, you get to go into the monastery. You get to see where they ate, how they lived, how they grew their own food, and their community there. One of the history things is when it came down from Rome to the king of Portugal, he said, "Okay, you're supposed to eliminate all your Knights Templar monks, just eliminate them, basically kill them off." And so he thought to himself, he's like, I don't want to kill off my monks. They're precious to me. And so what he decided to do, which I thought was very clever, he says, okay, so he writes back to Rome at the Vatican. He says, okay, we don't have any more Knights Templar monks anymore. They're all gone. And what he did is he just changed the name of the Knights Templar there at that complex to the Order of Christ. And he changed I've got the logos. I should have brought it with me. I didn't know we were going to be talking about the Knights Templar, but I actually have a logo of the Knights Templar cross, and then the cross of the Order of Christ. And the cross is very close, only they rounded the corners of the cross and made it a little different image, just a little bit. And so that's what he did. So he was able to protect his Knights Templar monks. And I think that it was, I'm trying to remember, I think they had as many as 900 that lived there, but then it was reduced down. The original temple, I shouldn't say temple complex, but it was kind of more of like a fortress. They call it a palace, but that was back in the 1200s to the 1400s. They lived there for about 200 years, and then they wanted to upgrade. So then they moved over to a little bit area. I don't know, maybe like by car, it's like 15 minutes. And they have it's this huge, it's a palace, and the grounds are beautiful. And then they had their monastery there. I did go through and into the cells. You're able to walk the hallways, take as many pictures as you want, go into the dining hall. There's an actual tour that you take. And you get to actually see their life and their where they worshiped. The church is just spectacular. I mean, I'm trying to remember how high the ceiling was. I think it's like 50 feet, 60 feet high. It's just amazing the beauty of this particular church that they would sing and worship in. And I was trying to get an energetic read on the place when I was there. And there's just this peace this serenity that as soon as you get onto the grounds, you feel it if you're very sensitive energetically. And also, when I would go into the different cells, when I'm walking the hallways, I was taking photos, and a lot of times I get orbs in a lot of these ancient sites. But in the Knights Templar monastery, and then also into the church and also into the temple, there was no orbs. That meant all of them went into the light. They're not hanging around there. They're very happy to cross over. So I just thought that was very, very interesting. They had a very peaceful sacred life there at this particular palace, and where they did their initiations and all this stuff and live their life. So again, for anybody who's all into the Knights Templar, I just can't recommend it again. It's an all-day thing to see both of the castles and the monasteries and all that at Tomar, Portugal. So
Oh, thank you for sharing. But it's just interesting how all of this information starts putting timelines together. So, for some reason, as you're reading chapter 3 today from your plant teacher medicine book, I am like into, okay, so it was definitely back during the time of Yeshua, Jesus, whatever you want to call him. And then fast forward, I go to, Salem witch hunt, and then I go to King James and killing off the demonic witchcraft of plants and all that stuff. And then my brain fast forwards to the early 1900s when, pharma starts its creation and, and then the annihilation of naturopaths and plants and all kinds of things. And then where we are now, and it's all starting to open back up again.
mhm,
And
mhm.
but it's coming back with new seeds, new energy of its original ancient forms, with this information that you're presenting. So thank you so very much for that. And I know that we're going to go on to chapter 4 and some other ones in the book. So I just want everybody to stay tuned and hold on to your hats because, if you choose to, you can get the book, and follow along. It's actually, pretty nice read. Save yourself the energy of listening to, Entertainment Tonight and People Magazine and, that's the Inquirer and all the other stuff that's out there that everyone's just reading, which is just junk, and put your mind to something that may expand your heart into places where you didn't think you could go. So, yeah. So, Dr. Nancy, anything you want to leave us with?
For those who are not into reading, they like Audible. It's also on Amazon Audible, and it's also on Barnes and Noble online, and Apple Books. For those who like, ebook, some people like the Kindle version, that type of thing. But I know that Audible is very popular, so it's on
Mm-hmm.
Audible for the as well. I narrate all my books. All my books are on Amazon Audible, so they can hear me basically talking and reading the book to them. So I
Well,
don't
that's
have to
nice.
turn a page.
It's better than AI's voice. It's nice to hear the voice of the author with the heart, and the passion around it from all the work that you have done, that you're bringing it forth through your vocals, which has an energetic pattern that hopefully people will receive with as much love as you had put into all of this. So thank you for that. So
Yes.
everybody, keep it spiritually simple. And we'll say goodbye to Dr. Nancy, and she's coming back on again to give us some more information. We do appreciate each like, subscribe, share. Remember, the time to align is now, the time to gain information and to regain control of your power within you, to understand that you can broaden your senses of awareness by looking for information, tuning into thyself and thy heart, and being in a space and a place connected to your breath, which will keep you in a healthier, happier state of creativity. So, anywho, Dr. Nancy, say goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye, everyone. We'll see you on the next episode.